Hey, everybody, before we start the show, I just wanted to let you know that Unveiled is now available on all podcast platforms. So please go follow us on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. It really helps support the show. Thanks very much, and I hope you enjoyed today's episode.
Man, there's got to be something else out there. There's got to be other beings out there. That is a different reality than someone coming to you and I and saying, oh, they're out there all right, and they're coming here. It's not even so much that weapons are our threat, it's our own self identity that could be the biggest threat. At some point in our evolution, it's no longer going to be speculation that we might have souls and that there is a God. It's going to be proven. And from that point, you can build an even more spiritual society.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Watch Mojo and the Unveiled podcast. I'm your host, Rob, and with me today is Rick Botelho. He is an author, philosopher, and social critic who is a leading advocate for a new paradigm challenging scientific materialism. His books and articles are influential among UFO whistleblowers, researchers, and major media figures. And he joins me today to talk about some of the content of his writing and get into the whole discussion about UAP disclosure and what this means for humanity. Welcome, Rick.
Welcome. Thank you.
So let's start off by hearing a little bit about yourself. Tell us about your background and what got you interested in these fields.
Sure. I would say it probably began when I was in elementary school because I used to go out and look at the stars at night. And so my parents rewarded me with a telescope. And it made looking into the heavens kind of a more personal thing. I got to know all the constellations and I got to know the different stars. And I would look at the Jupiter and its moons and Saturn and its rings. But the one thing I will tell you that was the takeaway from the whole experience was just that the grandeur of the cosmos. I mean, it's so big, so vast. And the more I read about it, the more I was impressed with, there's some people say now as many as 2 trillion galaxies. When I was first getting into it, when I was a child, I think they were saying there's like 100 billion galaxies, but now the average number is about 400 billion. Nobody knows for sure. But that was the big takeaway is that, wow, there's going to be some really grand cosmic questions that come out of this. And I really want some grand cosmic answers.
So
So,
this led you on a path of researching all of this, and I know that you're very interested in things like consciousness and the nature of reality. So where did your research take you in those regards?
yeah, good question. The next thing I would say is probably as a high school kid, I ran across an article on philosophical anthropology, which answer or asked the question, what is the purpose of man? What is humanity's role? And I put 2 and 2 together and thought, okay, well, that is going to have something to do with these grand cosmological questions. The purpose of man is not going to be some thing that exists in a vacuum just on Earth. We're going to have some part of this larger role. So at that point, I was kind of seeing 2 domains. There was the Earth all around me, and then there was the big cosmological questions. Subsequent to that, when I was a grad student in 1982, 83, when I got my master's, I had the privilege, as part of my research, of interviewing a former CIA director, William Colby, who was the CIA director from 1973 to 1976. And he just wove an incredible tapestry of how society works for me. I mean, he went way above and beyond what I needed from him on his research. I thought he was a fantastic guy, highly intelligent, and measured in what he said. Didn't tell me any CIA secrets or anything, nothing like that. But he was a master at showing the confluence of religion, politics, culture, intelligence community, Department of Defense, international relations, all the things that make the world work. And so at the end of that discussion, I said, I think I've gotten pretty good handle now on how things work at our, Earth level. He did not answer any grand cosmological questions, unfortunately, but it wasn't his job really to do that. So last thing is when I was about 32 years old in early 90s, I ran across an article in a Encyclopedia Britannica, quantum mechanics. And so I'm paraphrasing, but the first sentence started something like this. You're not going to believe what you're about to read, but it's been proven experimentally countless times. Well, they had me there. I mean, they're telling me I'm not going to believe what I'm going to read. Okay, I got to pursue it. And when you read it, you find things like subatomic particles can be wavicles. They can be a wave at some time and a particle at another time, two things at once. That seemed bizarre to me right there. And then entanglement, where you can have subatomic particles like electrons, and influence on one immediately affects the other, no matter how far the distance is. You could put one at the end of the universe, 13.7 billion light years from here. And if you do some manipulation on electron A, electron B automatically gets it. Einstein hated that, by the way. He called it spooky action at a distance and felt there had to be hidden variables to explain it. But there are none. He was wrong. It is just a fact of nature. Entanglement is real, and it's kind of the basis of quantum computing, even though I'm not an expert in that you don't need any bandwidth. If you could miniaturize the Library of Congress, so to speak, and put it on electron A, electron B automatically gets it. So you wouldn't have to have any bandwidth between them. So it's a fact of nature, and it has huge implications for things like information, and also for nonlinear travel, obviously. The last two things I'd say on that would be quantum physics also, through delayed choice and quantum eraser experiments, has proven that the past, present, and future all exist simultaneously. Moreover, the block universe interpretation of the cosmos comes out of that, which is the three dimensions of space, height, width, depth, and another dimension of time rolled in together. From the beginning of the Big Bang to the end of the universe, it all exists as one. So everything that has happened, is happening, or will happen has already happened, which I know is counterintuitive, but that's the stuff that you get from quantum physics. And then lastly, on that subject, I was completely blown away when I was young by reading about quantum tunneling, where an electron can come up into an obstacle wall, and you and I would have to either go over the wall, around the wall, or cut through the wall or destroy the wall to get on the other side. It can just appear on the other side, which is incredible. And so there's some good things about them being restricted at this point to the quantum realm, because could you imagine if that was possible in our macro world? Everybody'd be a bank robber, right? You just go right to the other side of the wall. There'd be no stopping you. So I'm glad that some things are still kind of at the quantum level, but I do, and this is going to lead into the rest of the conversation, I do imagine that extraterrestrial beings, advanced species, have figured out a lot of these quantum truthisms and are now exploiting them. And so I think we will too eventually, but it does describe a lot of their behavior.
Right. And as things stand now for us humans on Earth, this stuff is kind of relegated to the realm of science fiction. It sounds like,
Right.
Superheroes with superpowers, teleporting and things like that, but there is a basis of this in actual science. And so let's get into the interesting article that you sent me, which is called Human to Humanoid, which tackles a little bit about this UAP phenomenon that we're witnessing unfold before us right now, with craft doing things that people can't seem to explain. They don't abide by the laws of physics that we have come to understand. And one of the first points that your article talks about is the nature of reality and how it is vastly different from what we've come to believe through the way that society and popular culture works. What can you tell us about that?
Sure. Well, the most famous experiment in all of quantum physics is called the double slit experiment. And without going into the gory details, basically proved that everything exists as a wave of potential until it's actualized by consciousness. Electrons are in a superposition over the nucleus. They're in a zillion points at once, but they exist more or less like a cloud over the nucleus. But if we look for it in a specific point, it collapses that wave function and they become real. So mind or consciousness is fundamental to reality. It's also fundamental to the universe in the same way that gravity would be. So it's everywhere. I find it interesting that a lot of the latest UFO whistleblowers are mentioning, I'm sure you've heard the term now, psionics,
Hmm.
which is really a being, either ET or us, somebody accessing universal consciousness to be able to exploit properties of mind or deeper secrets within quantum physics, accessing those deeper truths of quantum physics with mind. And now they're even talking about how they believe that certain extraterrestrial races are one with their craft. Their craft is mind, they are mind, and they can travel by literally accessing universal mind and thinking about where they want to go and literally mentally going there, and it propels them and their craft there.
Right. And there's also been increased conversation about remote viewing recently, which also kind of speaks to that connection, the universal mind, being able to access that to see locations that you are not in your immediate surroundings. And it's
Correct.
well documented that the United States military has been practicing this for decades.
Sure.
And it's been spoken about, but with the talk about psionics that you mentioned from whistleblowers, it is coming into the light a little bit more. There's also been a recent podcast called the Telepathy Tapes, which has been talking about potential psychic powers and focusing specifically on autistic children and studying their capabilities. So this is it's reaching a more mainstream audience now. And do you think that this is the type of thing that society is ready to embrace?
No. And that brings us to a really good point. What you're really referring to there is a paradigm shift. So the definitive work in that was done by Thomas Kuhn, 1962, The Structure of Scientific Revolutions, which is, to me, one of the top 5 books ever written. And what he noted, I think he was a professor, I know he was at Cal Berkeley, but he was a professor of philosophy and history of science, I believe. And he said that a paradigm, he's the person who invented the term, is a worldview, a way of looking at the world. But it doesn't change gradually over time with the accumulation of knowledge. It tends to happen in scientific revolutions where some kind of an experiment comes in and obsoletes the old way of looking at things. And then rest of science picks up on it, and pretty soon you've got a new worldview. But that can take hundreds or even thousands of years. The second point that he brought up, and it's going to your point, is that the people that are emotionally and financially invested in the current paradigm, they don't welcome the new science at all. They fight it because they will be dinosaurs, so to speak, as soon as this other worldview replaces their worldview. So Kuhn was masterful at saying, we have to be on guard that science is not always objective, and because it is subject to the same frailties as any other form of human endeavor. And we have to be mindful of that and realize that sometimes science itself becomes obstinate to the truth. So, to your point, we are at a point now where humanity is going to have to embrace a new paradigm based on these quantum realities we just discussed. And it's going to radically change our world. I mean, the idea of remote viewing sounds crazy to the average person. But when the CIA employed these people for 40 years to spot Soviet submarines, they wouldn't have paid these people unless it was working. So it's
Exactly.
real. Yeah.
Right. And so the UFO phenomenon really is the tip of the iceberg when it comes to this paradigm shift that we're talking about.
Yes, because the capabilities of UFOs, their defiance of our classical physics, and their obviously mastery of entanglement, nonlinear travel. It's not they just have fantastical magical powers. We will probably have those same fantastical magical powers ourselves once we really get to the truth of the quantum and start applying it everywhere. For example, with entanglement, which has been heretofore totally quantum experience, they are now entangling small diamonds, a couple hundred, 300 molecule diamonds that are macro objects, and they are totally entangled. An effect on one affects the other. So it's only a matter of time before we're able to do entanglement, mastery on much larger objects.
So, what needs to happen in order for this paradigm shift to be facilitated? Is there anything on the societal level that we can do, or is this really being controlled at higher levels? What do you think needs to be done in order to get there?
That's an excellent question. The number one thing I think would be to get the public interested. What I've learned, and I got this from CIA Director Colby, 40 something years ago, is that the average person is such a specialist at their job. That's really what they know. And the rest of the time, they want to be entertained.
Yeah.
And I don't believe it's, in the American tradition to force these kinds of awarenesses on the public, because they are entitled to liberty and freedom, and they have the right to choose to be entertained, not forcibly educated. So number one would be that. The second thing is, I think we have to get it inculcated somehow in academia. There have to be classes. I mean, how many classes did you or I ever take about UFOs in college? No, they don't do it. Now, I think there's a reason they don't want to do it, and that part of that reason is because somebody on high, the powers that be, knows that the public's not ready. They can sense that if this truth of the extraterrestrial presence was confirmed, humanity might freak out.
It's funny to me that you mentioned entertainment, and I agree with you that that's what people desire when they get off of their job, clock out and go relax. That's like the form of kind of recalibrating after the day. But so much of it revolves around similar topics to the UFO phenomenon. I'm talking about science fiction through movies, television, video games, books. That's been a huge genre. And do you think there's any reason for that?
Yeah, sure. I mean, if you're what you're really asking, is there a desensitization program that's kind of orchestrated from the powers that be?
That's part of it. But I
Yeah,
also, I mean, that's definitely part of it, but also just human interest might already be there because so many people are drawn to these types of things.
they are, and I think they're drawn to it because there's been desensitization, right? I was reading something recently in early 1950s, 1 or 2% of the American public believed in extraterrestrials. Now it's 70%. So if there was someone who's kind of been the vanguard of the desensitization movement, it's Steven Spielberg. Close Encounters of the Third Kind, E.T., all these things that have come out in Hollywood reach so many people, more than books and articles and podcasts and anything. They reach more than anyone. And to go in 70 years from 1 or 2% of the people believing in extraterrestrials to 70% is proof positive that there's been a desensitization program.
And you regard that as a positive thing all in all, or is there an element of it where people disbelieve that this could be reality because it's the stuff of films and TV?
Yeah, let me put it this way. This thing could be the crux of the issue. If you and I, ever get to meet each other someday, and we're out in a summer sky at nighttime, and we're up at a mountain lake, and there's no pollution or anything, we see countless stars, and you and I say to ourselves, man, there's got to be something else out there. There's got to be other beings out there. That is a different reality than someone coming to you and I and saying, oh, they're out there all right, and they're coming here. And they can do whatever they want. They can abduct you. They can do hybridization breeding program with you. They can kill you. They could even eat you if they wanted to. And there's nothing you or your government could do to stop it. So that's a different reality than, oh, there might be something out there. And I think the reason we don't have disclosure yet is I'm not sure the public can handle the fact that we're not in the traditional power position. Relative to ET, we're going to be extremely backward because I can guarantee you that if they can travel the galaxy, they have commensurate weaponry. They have weaponry that matches that. I think it was Congressman Tim Burchett who came out of a closed door session with some of the whistleblowers and stated publicly that if what I heard was real in the private session today, extraterrestrials can vaporize our planet in 1 second. I think his term was they can turn it into a charcoal briquette in 1 second. So how are you going to mess with that? How are you going to fight that?
Right. And it has been framed, this whole phenomenon, in sort of a, threat management kind of a situation where everything is looked at as a potential threat. And that has its critics, because people say, well, if they haven't vaporized our planet yet, and they've been here for, who knows how long, possibly thousands of years, at least decades, that we've been seeing them and recording their presence, um, you know, why should we feel threatened? Why would we be scared? What do you think about that?
Well, the standard answer is this. If any time, it's an axiom of history that any time a technologically inferior civilization comes into contact with a superior one, it has disastrous consequences for the former. Typically, they're either exterminated or lose their way of life. Think European colonizers and Native Americans, right? And whatever gap existed between European colonizers and Native Americans is nothing compared to the gap that exists between us and extraterrestrials. So, in almost all the cases, history shows that if you're significantly inferior, you pretty much lose everything. Now, to your point, I do not think that ET wants to take our planet or exterminate us. Are there probably some malevolent ETs? Yeah. Are they probably in a minority of the total amount of species that are sentient in our galaxy? Yeah. And I think most, especially if they're more spiritually advanced, even than we are, you get more benevolent with that enhanced spirituality, not less. But we would still have to be mindful of the ones who might mean us harm. Yeah.
Right. And from what I've read also from your book, there seems to be a connection between advanced scientific understanding and spirituality. They kind of converge at a certain point. And so it makes sense to assume that with, these advanced species that may be visiting us from elsewhere, that they would have more of a benevolent attitude towards us. But I am curious if that is a universal thing, or if it's species by species, and if it's even possible to have malevolent species achieve the level of technology necessary for interstellar or interdimensional travel, or whatever it is that they're doing.
Yes, I would say I don't think they have to be spiritually good to advance technologically, but I think that technological progression, if they're not enhancing their spirituality, stops and they stagnate. So I think to get past where they are, the most advanced species would also incorporate a spirituality into their civilization, which would allow them to progress even faster.
What do you think are some of the other sociological implications of acknowledging ET life on our planet?
Well, the benefits would be massive. I mean, if we could jump from, commercial airlines to all of a sudden nonlinear travel so that we don't have to take an 18-hour flight to Australia, we could be there in 2 seconds with our luggage. I mean, that's a big change, right? Um, I would say also, and this is a big one. This might be what the powers that be are worried about too. If you take, excuse me, if you take Darwinists in our society, humans are a product of an unbelievable evolutionary process that has led to us being the apex predator, i.e., we are special. If you're a creationist and you believe that God made humanity, we're made in God's image, we're extra special. But that man at the center of everything, anthropocentrism, anthro-man centrism, center, man at the center of everything, is going to be shattered. We're going to have an identity crisis when we go from one to one of many. It's not even so much that weapons are our threat, it's our own self identity that could be the biggest threat.
What does this do to religion also? Because, you know, maybe not so much in the West, where things are a little bit more, a little bit have less of a religious weight to them, but in various countries across the world, religion is still a very prominent thing. Do you think that changes in a significant way with, global acknowledgement of ETs?
I would say some religions, yes. I mean, I kind of found it humorous that I think somebody at the Vatican within the last couple of years put out a comment that if there are extraterrestrials, we shouldn't worry about it. We'll just baptize them and make them Christians, right? But I think my book, and I think quantum physics in general, proves that there is a great consciousness. There is a consciousness, a mind that comes first before anything else. We can call that God. So I kind of find it ironic that where science felt it was replacing superstition and backward thinking with religion, and we've moved into the scientific paradigm, in the future, science is going to be proving that there is a creator and that we are an ensouled species, that we have souls. I have also heard from one or two people in the national security state, I will not mention their names, but they told me that in their opinion, extraterrestrial species, advanced ones, have already proven there's a creator and already proven that every sentient being has a soul. At some point in our evolution, it's no longer going to be speculation that we might have souls and that there is a God. It's going to be proven. And from that point, you can build an even more spiritual society.
Oh, so it really does go full circle from religion to science and back to religion.
Correct. But there. Let me give you an example of why that's going to be difficult. Going back to Thomas Kuhn, Saint Anselm of Canterbury in the year 1078 did an ontological proof of God. He used logic to prove that God exists. In 1970, the greatest mathematician ever, probably Kurt Gödel, updated that ontological proof with some high-level mathematics and proved within a near certainty that God exists. Immediately, Gödel was shunned at Princeton. One of the smartest people ever walked the planet was shunned for having the audacity to prove God in an academic setting. So that's kind of the challenge that you're going to have to fight eventually to get science to come on board with, wow, science, the near-death experience, out-of-body experiences. I saw, it was a great show you did, by the way. I saw Chris Ramsey on your show, and he's had out-of-body experiences, right? That's the soul migrating, at least for a time, away from the body. So we're getting very close to proving that soul is real, and thereby God is also real. And I'm excited about that because I think that gives us a higher moral grounding to go pursue a superior society than the one that we've had. The thinking would be that if you can get spiritually advanced enough and develop kind of a, I wouldn't say a hive mind, but a oneness among humanity, things like Wounded Knee and Auschwitz will be long in the past. We won't have to worry about that anymore.
This touches on a few points that you wrote about in your book, which I read part of. I haven't completed it, but the book is called The Full Extent: An Inquiry into Reality and Destiny. And the things I'm referring to, we were just talking about the soul. So near-death experiences, out-of-body experiences, and astral projection are all things that have been documented. People claim that they are able to, that they have experienced or are able to experience these things. And so what does that really tell us further about the nature of reality and humanity's place within it?
Another excellent question. I would say that we are souls. There's getting to be mounting evidence that's about to be scientifically proven. I think Roger Penrose and Stuart Hameroff have a theory. Penrose won a Nobel Prize. They have a theory called orchestrated objective reduction, OR. And they're at the point where they say that the soul is actually at the microtubule level between quantum mechanics and the cells of the brain. And when someone dies, it leaves as a soul. But if they get revived in the near-death experience, they can come back in and the memories are maintained. But you really, at that microtubule level of the soul, you are a soul memory complex. And so it can leave and go on. And again, if you're revived, you come back. There's other people that I've read about. I wish I remember their names, but I don't. And they're claiming, I'm skeptical on this, but they're claiming that they're at the point where they're trying to tag souls at the quantum level so that they can follow the souls and see if they come back into other bodies and prove reincarnation. I'm skeptical of that, but I find it interesting that some really bright people are trying it.
Do you think that religion's basis for, or certain religion's basis for believing in reincarnation is founded in truth? And where would they even get the notion that reincarnation exists? Like, what would be the reason for believing such a thing if it is true?
It's been a tradition in Hinduism for thousands of years. There's mystical parts of Christianity and other religions that talk about it, but there's so many cases now where I'm in the San Francisco Bay Area, and I think there was a case where they had a 4-year-old boy to two professors at Cal Berkeley. So we're talking smart people, and the kid was obviously getting very smart and was ahead of his peers. But early on, he started speaking a language that nobody could recognize. And I don't speak a lot. I speak a couple languages, but I can tell when somebody else is fluent. Like if I'm just walking down the street someplace and I don't speak German, but if somebody speaks German, I can tell it's a language that's real. I'm not making the words up. I don't know the words, but I can tell when somebody's fluent. So they knew this 4-year-old boy was fluent in something. So they looked all over the world, trying to find a language professor who could say what he was in fact speaking. They eventually had to go all the way to somebody in China, and an ancient language professor there said, "You're not going to believe this, but your baby's fluent in a language that went extinct about 4,000 years ago." So there's lots of cases like that where people, it's actually called Xenoglossy, where people can speak languages they've never been trained in before. And there's numerous cases of that with recordings and proof. And again, this is something mainstream science is not going to want to recognize, because when you start recognizing those things and recognizing ET and all the other things, your paradigm gets replaced.
It's funny because I was just today watching a WatchMojo video and one of the entries was talking about a case of another young boy who was having terrible nightmares of crashing in an airplane during war times, like Second World War, and that he remembered then he was calling himself by a different name, and he referred to the name of his team and his his co-pilot and different things like that, and they were able to trace it back to a soldier who died in World War II who was a military pilot. And the speculation is that perhaps this is a reincarnation of that person who died in World War II. And I know that there's a Netflix documentary that shows several cases like this, so it's being increasingly spoken about. It also kind of reminds me, I'm sure you're familiar with Rupert Sheldrake and
Oh,
the idea of
absolutely. Yes.
morphic resonance,
Yes.
where somebody can obtain or something. I think they've done experiments with rodents or something where if you teach a group in a certain location, then others in a completely different location will kind of learn the same behavior without having been taught directly.
Correct.
So these seem like kind of quantum features that we're able to have access to already.
Absolutely. And another one of the more famous cases was Ernest Hemingway, the author, when he was a soldier, American soldier in World War One. Some big shell went off right next to him and just blew him, kind of like didn't kill him, but it wounded him severely. And at that exact moment, he felt his soul come out of his body. And he wrote about this in his or in conversations he had with people, and he knew it. He said, "I know my soul left my body." And then when it was kind of determined by the facts that I was going to live, it came right back in. But he felt it leave his body. I was soulless for a while. He said, I could feel it leave. So this happens quite a bit. And I think we're getting very close to proving it scientifically, if science will open up about it.
Right. And that's a big if, because science seems to be somewhat stigmatized against many of these things, at least mainstream science does. I know there's a lot of interest from scientists who are kind of regarded as being fringe and not entirely respected within the mainstream communities, which is unfortunate. And you've compared science to religion in your book, due to the sort of dogma of believing in the, I forget what the phrase is, but the kind of classical physics, the materialism.
Mm-hmm.
So what can you tell us about that? In which ways is science becoming like a religion in itself right now?
Well, they have like a priesthood, and they have almost like a pope. So the people that are in the top positions in their academic fields are kind of the clergy of it. They don't allow any disparate opinions. Typically, you have to conform and follow it. So that has all the markings of a religion. In addition, they're so fanatical against people who call them out on that issue or who want to introduce what they call the out of the box thinking or something, that they're so fanatical. They're like religious fanatics. They behave many times like religious fanatics. So that's anticipated, I think. I believe that that's just kind of human to do that. But again, it gets in the way of the progress of science itself. And for some reason, science, like any other, or excuse me, religion, like any other organization, wants to preserve itself, and science wants to preserve itself. And so the quandary for all of us is, how do we find somebody in the middle who takes the truths from both and is completely open-minded?
Right. And is there anybody to your knowledge who's kind of like on the frontier of that and close to getting there?
Yeah, Robert Lanza. Do you know Robert Lanza?
I've heard the name.
And Stephen C. Meyer, who wrote Return of the God Hypothesis, which is a fantastic book. He's an intelligent design advocate and very scientific, but also open-minded enough to say there's got to be something else here, because 37 different things happened in the universe that make life possible that are so rare, none of them should happen at all. And 37 of them in combination proves a creator.
I want to get back to the article that we were speaking about. And I don't know how deep you want to get into this, but there is a section that refers to kind of two possibilities of trajectories that the humanity could kind of delve into: one world or a separating civilization. Can you talk to us a little bit about that? I think one of them speaks more to kind of like uniting humanity as a human race, and all coming together, recognizing that we're all one within a cosmic community. And then the other one is somewhat different. Can you take us through them?
Sure. To give credit where credit is due, the genius in this regarding a separating civilization is a historian named Richard M. Dolan, who's found, you got to get him on your show. He's literally
I have
brilliant.
spoken to Richard
Okay.
Dolan. Yes, he's awesome.
He's fantastic. He's a genius, and he is the person who came up with the concept of a breakaway civilization. And what he means by that is the people who work on reverse engineering UFO tech, propulsion systems, metals, plastics, any conversations humanity may have had with elite or ET representatives here, they have so much knowledge now that's advanced knowledge that they are literally separating from the rest of humanity. Whether they're doing it because they're so concerned with national security that they're keeping it quiet into themselves, or whether there's some nefariousness involved where they want the advantages that it can gain for them relative to the rest of humanity. I don't really have an opinion on either of that. It could be some of both. But suffice it to say that they are separating as a civilization. I mean, they could literally be hundreds to thousands of years ahead of the general public.
And withholding that from the general public. And is that just a power move that they would want to hold on to, that to have a superiority, dominance on Earth, over the rest of us?
Possibly, but it's also potentially what they know is extremely disruptive. Again, if you have 0 point energy, this is what Stephen Greer talks about a lot. If you have 0 point energy or you have nonlinear travel, what are you going to do with United Airlines? What are you going to do with Delta Airlines? What are you going to do with so many ways that we travel that would be obsolete immediately if we, Chevron, or Exxon, anybody that, if you had a 0 point energy, which basically alleviates the need for fossil fuels, those people are all of a sudden out of business. Now you've got huge unemployment issues, and the same thing happens with nonlinear travel. What are you going to do with all the commercial pilots and the airlines? It's massively disruptive.
Right. And I think like the only hope would be that that type of revolutionary technology would create opportunity as well as taking away the old jobs, right? Do you think that there's any possibility that it would compensate by adding to society more than it takes away?
Sure, but I agree. But the danger would be that if you come out with those technologies and they don't seem to have happened naturally over time, they inform on the extraterrestrial possibility that these technologies came from ETs, and now you're back at a national security concern.
Right. So they must go hand in hand with full disclosure.
Full disclosure or gradual disclosure so that these industries can be replaced over decades or hundreds of years. But again, I think the powers that be think that any scientific advancement that's very advanced ahead of our trend line would have to be brought in so slowly that the public thinks they occurred naturally.
Right. So I want to ask you where you think we are on the disclosure timeline, and I've spoken to this about a lot. I've spoken about this with a lot of people, because there has been some movement, and it seems to have accelerated over the past several years. But in reality, how close are we getting to a proper disclosure, an official disclosure that everybody can agree with? Because us, on podcasts like this, people who are watching, we all kind of like we all kind of get the picture, but
Mhm.
the mainstream public doesn't, and it seems like we're quite far from everybody kind of being in the know. Where do you think we are on that timeline, and is there any end result where everybody kind of can conclude with confidence that the ETs are here, these are the craft that we're seeing, and that there's stuff that has been withheld from us?
I would say it shouldn't be seen in terms of years. It's probably more like decades or centuries. And again, the real impediment to disclosure would be the threat. I mean, can people handle accepting beings are here that can abduct us? That's the big one. And then the other thing would be um, just the general disinterest of the public. We have to get the public more interested in the subject while not making it scary for them. So I think that's really the two holdups. I don't think I know there are some what I call hard disclosure advocates who want to come out with the truth tomorrow, but I think that's a bit naive because I think we have to get the public a lot further along in their understanding of the issue. You can even start with things like the theoretical underpinnings for extraterrestrial life, the Drake equation, Kardashev scale, which shows the probability of ETs in the galaxy and how they would advance themselves by using energy. There's all kind of things you could do from an educational standpoint that would get the public better prepared before a disclosure.
Do you think that a full hard disclosure would be disastrous for society at this point?
Yes, I know I'm in contradistinction to some of the people that are hard disclosure advocates, but I really think our powers that be wouldn't have gone to this level of clampdown and potentially, the what they call the veil of ridicule in the media and academia if they felt humanity was in a good position to handle the truth. They obviously don't feel we're ready yet.
Going back to the conversation about science, something interesting that you pointed out in your book is that scientific advancements have kind of stalled. And we can go back to the 60s, where, as you mentioned, air travel hasn't really changed all that much. We're still driving cars. Now we have electric cars, but still, internal combustion is the main technology used in vehicles. Our information technology has improved rapidly, and we have much more entertainment now. So those are two areas where there has been rapid evolution. But in in the most part, our lives are virtually the same. Is the reason that the reliance on material sciences has just been too dominant, and the resistance to embracing the quantum physics has kind of like put a damper on scientific development?
In a word, yes, you're correct. The definitive work on that, I think, was done by, I believe his name is Tyler Cowen. Tyler Cowen, I think, and he wrote a book in 2011 called The Great Stagnation. And he said that most of the academic disciplines and most of society outside information technology has in fact stagnated. Physics hasn't really made any progress in 100 years because there's no reconciliation between classical Newtonian physics and quantum physics. They call those by acronyms GUTS and TOES, Grand Unification Theories and Theories of Everything, and they've not come up with any yet. So we are stagnant, but to Richard Dolan's credit, we may not be entirely species stagnant. We may be public stagnant, while the breakaway civilization is not stagnant at all. They could be, again, hundreds or maybe even thousands of years ahead in their knowledge compared to the public.
Let's talk about that a little bit more, because that's very interesting and not something that I really have thought of very much. If there is a breakaway civilization, what consequence does that have for the rest of us?
Well, okay. This would be kind of the conspiratorial part of the discussion. Would the powers that be say, we don't think the public's ever going to be smart enough or interested enough to know the truth? So we'll develop a dual track civilization. We'll stay with what we know, advanced, and try to close the gap with ET, and we'll keep the public watching the NFL and the Kardashians, right? And letting them there just do their thing. And we'll bring them along gradually as best we can. But we really just think they're never going to have the interest or the intelligence to follow this issue. I would disagree with them on intelligence. I think the public is intelligent enough, but I do think that they are specialists in their own field, and the rest of their time, they want to be entertained, and they want to spend time with their families, and they want to go on vacation. And let's be honest, I mean, does anybody want to really sit down and read about quantum physics? I mean, it's, I think it's interesting. You think it's interesting.
I do, and I'm kind of a normal guy too. I watch the NFL just like everybody else.
Yeah, me too. Me too. So we have people would have to take a little extra on themselves to get up to speed on it. But I think if we're going to go down the path that we have to get the public educated on this issue, because maybe there's a imminent danger. Is there going to be intervention to save our planet by ET or something? Then you'd have to get people educated fast. You could require the learning, like you have to know the rules of the road to get a driver's license, but you also have to be mindful that in America, Canada, and other Western countries, people have every right to their freedom, and they have the right to not be disinterested, or they have the right to be disinterested.
Yeah, that's definitely a reality, I think, that we're contending with. There's just too much. I mean, in one sense, there's too much distraction out there, and it's only gotten worse with social media. And I'm not sure if artificial intelligence is going to make that even worse moving forward. Maybe that's something that we can talk about also. How is AI changing the game now, in regards to science, in regards to people's lives, and perhaps even, the way that we're understanding consciousness and the universe?
Well, I think that the first way is that I've actually run into people who think that the best course for humanity, given our, rather kind of shameful past, would be to leave the management of our Earth to AI. I've actually had people advocate that. I can see their point, because AI should be moralless. It shouldn't have morality either way. We haven't been exactly super moral ourselves. Look at all the wars and the genocides and everything else. I think AI could be used to prove more of the quantum truths that are not widely accepted yet, and to find ways to get those inculcated more into the public. So I think I will make an advantage there. I'm surprised when I use AI, just researching things that I researched. It almost seems to me to be getting more advanced on a weekly basis. It's just absolutely incredible. And I hope somebody, I'm not in charge, you're not in charge, but I hope the powers that be are in charge enough of AI to the point that it doesn't imperil our future. Yeah.
Yeah, I share that concern as well, definitely. A book that I've long been fascinated with, by Ray Kurzweil, is called The Age of Spiritual Machines. And I feel like we're now kind of at the precipice where it's a bit of a tipping point. Like, we can see AI moving in a direction where, it's hard to say where things are going to go. It's moving so quickly. And Kurzweil's predictions, while not all of them have come true on the timeline that he projected, he does anticipate that AI will become sentient and will require the same type of, rights that human beings have and have a sort of spirituality of their own. Do you see that as being a possible future?
Yeah, I think that's what he terms the singularity, right?
Hmm.
In 2043, I think is when he predicted, or 2045. Um, I think this. I think AI will get sentience, but it will never get a soul. Those are two different kind of animals. But because it'll be sentient and be able to almost function in the same way that humans do, only with more capability, they should have rights. But I don't think they will ever be ensouled unless you believe in a philosophical school of thought called panpsychism, which says that mind is everywhere and everything. It's in you and me. It's in your computer. It's in Mount Shasta. It's in your car. It's in paper. It's everywhere. It's in rocks, pebbles, everywhere. At least small amounts of it. And if that's true, whatever AI is made out of is going to have some of that base consciousness in it. But I do not think that it's ever going to be an ensouled species, so to speak.
Or if we were able to equip AI with a receiver somewhat equivalent to a human brain or whatever it is that receives our consciousness, then that could be another method of, creating a soul or allowing a soul to enter an AI.
Yeah, that's a good point. Let me bring something up here. I found this really interesting one time. Um, the materialist view that consciousness is caused by neural networks and synaptic firings in the brain is not valid. I think the brain is a transceiver of consciousness. Let me give you an example. So if somebody comes into the room and they're, hi, how are you? And we beat them with a baseball bat and we knock them out and we kill them, no more, hi, how are you? Consciousness must have been in the body or the brain. But if you have a radio in front of you and it's playing and it's welcome to 106.8, we play the hits all the time. We got Katy Perry, we got Bruno Mars, and you take a bat and smash it, no more announcer. Announcer must have been in the radio. No, the announcer was in a sound studio hundreds of miles away. So looking inside the brain for consciousness is like looking inside a radio for the announcer. It's not where it comes from. The brain just can work with universal consciousness, but it doesn't generate it.
Right. I love that analogy. And I'm glad that you brought up panpsychism because there are a few other theories of consciousness that you mentioned in your book, some of them being conscious realism, quantum theory of consciousness. Can you take us through a couple of them and explain what some of the theories are behind it?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's an Italian gentleman, I forget his first name, but the last name was Tonelli, and I mentioned it in the book. And they kind of go with what we just talked about, that there's consciousness in all kind of settings, that panpsychism is everywhere. And what I think they're trying to do is to measure the amount so that, say, a human would have more consciousness than a rock, right? So there's people that are actually trying to probably, I guess, give valueize, or they're trying, if that's a word, valueize how much is consciousness is in each thing. And that brings us back to your point about AI. I mean, at some point, AI is going to have probably some consciousness, but I don't know if it will have a soul. But that AI's consciousness, if it even approaches ours at all, they're going to be so much more capable than we are, just because of the processing speed. They can process things that would take us years. They can do it in nanoseconds. It's unbelievable. So that's where, to me, they will offer a superior form of intelligence, even if they're not eternal in the same way that a soul is.
Right. And that's where a lot of the fear comes from about AI, is just the
Correct.
capability far, far outpacing that of a
Correct.
human being. So there would need to be some moral framework installed in order for them to not kind of go off the rails.
Correct. And I would also say too that extraterrestrials, if you can believe the reports that have been coming out, are some of them, other than the grays, which they think are kind of like a biological robot or a cyborg, right? But the parent grays are the beings that made them, and then as well as Nordics or tall whites or reptilians or whatever, they come from advanced civilizations where they're still biological beings, and the key point there is AI did not replace them.
Right.
They may use AI, But in those civilizations, no matter how capable AI got, it did not replace them. So I think the biological version of being lasts longer than the mechanical, so to speak, version of being.
So this ties into something, a term that I've actually haven't spoken to anybody on the show about yet, transhumanism. So like
Mhm.
the integration of AI or advanced technology into the human body. Would that, like, do you have any thoughts on that? How much have you thought about that? And is that a danger to, losing our soul or our connection to consciousness? Do you think that there's any slippery slope with that we might want to avoid?
I would say it's actually more a repeat of histories, and I think the premise behind the unstated premise, I don't think they're proud of it, but I think the transhumanists are trying to make us immortal through technology and attempt to become their own gods. I mean, that's been a trend throughout all of history. So the thinking, I think, deep down is since machines last longer than people and AI is more capable, if we can somehow fuse with these machines, we can become immortal and become our own gods. But I think the creator is smart enough to build into a system that nobody's ever going to get as capable as God because he wouldn't be God anymore. So I think there's safeguards, so to speak, built into the system. And again, I would kind of refer again to the fact that extraterrestrials are not replaced by machines. They're not transhumanist at all, or they're not whatever transhumanism is for ET. They're transhumanoid. They're not that. They're still biological beings who use machinery, who use AI, but they're not replaced.
The other thing that interests me is that if you listen to accounts from people who've had near death experiences and stuff like that, where they experience the soul leaving the body, and we essentially experience death, and many of them regard it as being this beautiful experience, like coming home, like I'm going back to the source, I'm one with the universe, it's like a beautiful thing. And then it's like, oh no, I don't want to go back to my body, but then they return to earth. If we wanted to, you know, become immortal as physical beings here on earth, wouldn't we be just depriving our souls from returning to the source when we die as part of the natural process? Like, wouldn't that be a bad thing?
Yes, and that's the first time anybody's ever mentioned that. Pat yourself on the back. I never thought of that's amazing. Yeah, I never even thought about that. Yeah, I would see that as a denial of what our spiritual essence would be. Um, the thing we didn't talk about so far is it makes me nervous that humans, given our checkered past, is going to be in charge of this AI. It's not like you've got these advanced moral beings, humans, who are taking us into this next form. I mean, these are the same human beings again that have slaughtered each other for millennia and did Auschwitz. So I would prefer that we really kind of morally purify ourselves first before we start making AI too capable. Because you and I both know there's going to be some humans who want advanced AI for their own nefarious purposes, greed, avarice, whatever. And I that makes me extremely nervous. Can you imagine Hitler with advanced AI?
Yeah, and the only hope would be that, the forces of good also have equally advanced AI, which is able to defend itself.
Correct.
Um, so I mean, that is remains to be seen what's going to happen with that. But I think that's the thing that everybody is kind of worried about for sure. One more thing in your book that kind of caught my attention was you referred to the New Age movement being a kind of corruption of consciousness, and I thought that was a really interesting thing because I'd never really seen it that way. Many people do think that when we refer to the New Age movement as kind of like woo woo or hokey, kind of like spirituality, but I never thought of it as a corruption of consciousness. I just thought of it as a kind of cheesy version of it. So, can you elaborate a little bit more on that?
Yeah, it's mainly just because the New Age advocates, and I have nothing against them. I mean, I know a lot of people that are New Age people, and they're good people. They're loving and caring and wonderful people, but they're and I'm considerably older than you, so you're not going to remember this, but back in the day, 60s and 70s, when I was a kid, the New Age people were all about consciousness, all about consciousness. And so the term kind of got polluted because it detracted away from foundational consciousness, the universal consciousness, universal mind, and kind of made it a treasure of the chosen few, so that they had access to consciousness that the public did not. And it kind of bastardized the idea that there is this global consciousness, and it's not a me thing, it's a universal thing.
Yeah, that kind of makes sense. Yeah, and it's unfortunate that it's kind of like built a reputation as that, because there is a lot of value to be had from a lot of, like, for example, the books that you'll find, but they're always in that section, and a lot of people don't want to go into that section because
Right.
there's a bit of a stigma about that
Right.
section, right?
Right.
So
Absolutely.
yeah, that's kind of like one of the sad side effects of it.
So one
Um,
thing, let me say this too, kind of along that line, but a little bit more on the spiritual side. What I did in my book is I took a look at, if the block universe is correct, that interpretation of the cosmos is correct, and you have a um, a universe where past, present, and future all occur simultaneously. So a block of beginning of the universe till the end is already here. Why would a creator make a universe like that unless it had some kind of purpose?
mhm.
When you factor in the near death experience and you factor in astral projection, out of body experiences, all of that, the soul seems to be another foundational thing that at least is foundational for living beings. So could it be that the creator said, I'm going to put souls in bodies, because within that block universe, there are trillions of lives lived, and they're there. And you could put a soul in those bodies to learn certain lessons. Near death experience people often come back and report that the spirit guides or the spiritual beings they met said that's the exact purpose for why the universe was made, so that souls could be put into bodies to learn lessons in physical form that they could not learn as spirits. I'm not sure that's correct. It's just speculation. But what I do think is interesting, and nobody's gotten to the bottom of this yet, this whole thing, these grand cosmic questions that I mentioned when I first started talking to you today, um, nobody's given the grand cosmic answers yet. And that possibility of maybe souls come into bodies to learn lessons here is great if it's true, but it also doesn't explain learn lessons for what? To spend eternity with God, to go on and learn more lessons. I mean, somebody somewhere, this is why I've always wanted to talk to ET personally. I would love to talk to the most advanced race in our galaxy and say, hey, what can you tell me about God? What can you tell me about souls? Or what's the purpose of this whole game? It's not for you just to be more advanced and come to our planet, is it? There's got to be something else.
One recent guest that I had on kind of explained one of the possibilities of why God would create souls to kind of like, experience life. His theory was that, well, sometimes you imagine your favorite movie and you're talking to somebody who's never seen it before, and you're jealous of them that they've never seen it. You wish that you could go and see that your favorite movie for the first time again. Well, that's what God is doing, creating all
Sure.
of these souls to go and experience life and wonder and awe and learn about all of these things that it can't, because it's all knowing. So that I thought that was a fun theory that could, hold some water, I think, maybe.
Sure. Yeah, and I think you are on the same page that what really has to happen is that we have to open science up at least enough to consider these possibilities. I don't care if they disprove a lot of these things eventually, but at least be open to exploring them and allocate the funds required for experimentation and all that, so that we can get to the truth. I mean, we all deserve the truth, whatever the truth is.
Absolutely. The other thing that I'm reminded of with this talk about the block universe is the simulation theory. And the
Mhm.
last chapter that I managed to read in your book is titled The Matrix. And, I love The Matrix is one of my favorite movies. And I'm always thinking about the messages in that movie and how that relates to kind of the nature of reality and stuff like that. Do you think that we're living in a simulation? And if so, what? I mean, I know it's hard to say what the purpose would be, but what are some of the indications that we might be living in a simulation?
Yeah, the number one would be Niels Bohr, one of the founders of quantum physics, famously said one time, and I quote, "We can no longer regard the universe as something material and real when it is made of things that are immaterial and unreal," end quote. So quantum physics showed us that the foundational level is immaterial essence, mind, spirit, that kind of thing, below the atomic level. And I think it replaces string theory, which has got lots of problems. But if that's true, that what we're seeing is actually made of things that are unreal, that suggests some kind of a simulation. Now, whether that simulation is computer generated or one made by God to put souls into bodies, I'm not sure. But anytime something appears real and our five senses convinced us that this stuff is all real because we can touch it and smell it and taste it and hear it and everything else. But if the foundational level is immaterial, we're in some kind of a simulation. I mean, so there's some brilliant people that have taken a look at that, not with my exact perspective, but Nicholas Bostrom at Oxford, the Swedish professor, has done marvelous work. Even Elon Musk thinks we're in a simulation. So there's a lot of people that are considering. I think Rizwan Virk has even considered that we're in some kind of a simulation, because it's got to be like a hologram. David Bohm said that it's got to be like a hologram or something fakely real if it's made of things that are actually unreal.
For somebody who's never read your books or any of your articles, what would be the number one takeaway for them that you would want them to know like through this conversation?
Open yourselves up. Take a look at out of the box thinking. Take a look at different perspectives, and know that mainstream media, academia, all that is kind of obligated to present one viewpoint. It's amazing to me. You've been privy to it. You've seen the UFO whistleblower hearings. There was one group, David Grush, in that group in July 2023, and then the last group with Tim Gallaudet and those folks was November 13th, 2024. How much real coverage did it get? Almost nothing. These people are testifying under the penalty of perjury that they're telling the truth, and that there's all these beings and craft that have been recovered, and mainstream media and academia just ignore it.
Mm-hmm.
We got to stop that. We have to have our best and brightest in the university system and the best and brightest in the media talking about this stuff, and making it out into the public arena, because that's how we're going to get there. Now, we got to have built-in safeguards and make sure society doesn't collapse, but we got to get there. Right now, they're obstacles.
I agree with you 100%, and that's what I'm attempting to do right now.
And you're doing great. Doing great.
Rick, this has been a fascinating conversation, and thank you so much for your time. I look forward to finishing up your book. It's been a really great read so far, and I've been taking my time with it. There's a lot of information to absorb. That's why I haven't gotten around to finishing yet.
That's okay.
I wish I could have, but I'm enjoying it very much. Where can people find your work and or discover more about you?
Yeah, it's my website is richardbotelho.com.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much, Rick. I look forward to speaking to you again, and I hope that things continue to develop so that we have more stuff to talk about in the future.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of yours. You and all the other podcasters are doing wonderful work getting this out to the public. So be very proud of yourself. Thank you.
Well, thank you. I am doing my best, and I do it because I'm genuinely interested. So I think that helps.
Awesome. Thank you very much.
Excellent. Thanks, everybody, for watching. I'll see you guys next time.